It's entirely reasonable to ask some form of the question, why isn't my video getting views? A successful video has a number of factors that go into it. It can be hard to diagnose. And to make matters worse, there is a component of luck here, and how do we separate out that luck? Let's start with my disclaimer that I call Rule 0. I'm just assuming the content is good. If you are trying to diagnose your own video, you need to believe that the content's good. If you don't, there's your problem. No need for further examination. However, this does lead into one of our first places that we can diagnose. Did the audience receive this really poorly? If your audience just straight up tells you they didn't like it, well, then they probably didn't like it. So with that out of the way, we can ask our first big question. Is this video actually doing poorly? Believe it or not, sometimes people don't answer this question correctly. People can get confused because they're not asking other questions about their channel. Has my channel been on a hot streak recently? Does my channel have some kind of seasonal performance to it? What's my average upload done in the last 6 months? Based on the answers to these questions, you might just have created incorrect expectations for your video. If your channel has some kind of seasonal content and it tends to do really well in, say, the summer, and then around the start of fall your views start to drop on uploads, that's not necessarily the fault of the upload, you're just out of season. A hot streak is a little bit harder to detect, but if your videos are doing really well right now, it can set you up for new super high expectations. And then when your next video does closer to average, it doesn't feel like an average upload. It feels like my views are going down, oh my God. That's not happening, you're just at the end of a hot streak. And as much as we love to keep those going, sometimes it just doesn't happen. The key to noticing hot streaks is to look much further back in your history. Look back 6 months, look back a year. You'll probably notice that there's a lot of peaks and valleys in your timeline, and this is pretty natural. The thing that you need to not do is compare the peaks to the valley. So if you look at your views over the last 6 months, you're going to notice a natural ebb and flow to it. You're gonna see your ups, your downs, your ups and downs as you go over time. If you're trying to figure out why a video did bad, first, is it in one of these slumps? And secondly, is this slump a problem? One of the ways to examine this is to take this low period and compare it to the next kind of low period in the graph. Draw a straight line across the more recent one. Is it above this other slump? If so, this could just be a period that's lower than your high streaks, but you're still growing over time. But we're not done yet. That tells us that the channel overall is doing pretty well, but it doesn't tell us a ton about this individual video. Typically, what I'd like to do is compare it to the most similar video I have on the channel. Things that determine how similar videos are can be everything from the personality that's hosting, to the topic, to the title, to the style of thumbnail. Factor everything in and try and find the video that's most like this one and then compare them to each other. Here at Little Monster, Matt and I have both done videos. And even if we cover similar topics, we're different people and we give off different vibes, and that can make comparing our videos to each other much harder. When we look into our analytics, Matt's videos on average tend to perform better than mine, which is totally okay. It makes sense. Not everyone in the audience is ready for the young, handsome, funny one who talks a little bit too much about Pokemon. So if I'm trying to figure out if one of my videos did particularly badly, I shouldn't compare it to videos with Matt in them, I should compare it to videos that I'm in. This is going to give me a much clearer analysis and a much better picture about A, whether or not the video has truly failed, and B, what I should be doing to make it better. Okay, so let's say we've looked at super similar videos and the video in question is still performing badly in that comparison. Now we get to dive into the fun part, which is the math part. So when we dive into our analytics, the first place I'm going to look is average view duration in CTR. So if there's a really obvious, super glaring problem, it's going to show up here first. We talk about thumbnails as one of the most important things, and that's still true. So if I'm analyzing a video that didn't do well, most of my first questions are about the thumbnail and the title, which means CTR. So I take the problematic video's CTR and I compare it to what I typically expect from a recent upload. If they're wildly different, say most of my videos get a 7% CTR and this one got a 2% CTR, I pretty much have the answer right there. It was a bad thumbnail or a bad title or both. 99 times out of 100, one of these is the issue. Okay, what if they're really similar, but the views are really different? Well, then obviously that means the impressions are a little bit lower. People clicked on it at the same rate, but a lot less people were actually shown the video. For this, we don't want to look at just CTR, we want to look at day one CTR. YouTube is a platform of momentum. The first 24 hours are going to determine how good the first 48 hours are, and the first 48 hours are going to determine how good the first 7 days are, and so on and so on and so on. So maybe my video has the same average CTR overall, but its CTR is way lower than average on day one. This tells us that the audience that showed up on day one didn't click on it nearly as much, so that typical audience we expect didn't resonate with the video. YouTube's going to observe that people weren't clicking on it nearly as much as they click on your other videos, and it's going going to adjust its recommendations accordingly. Because it's giving your content to a much narrower audience at this point, CTR is naturally going to shoot up, which can get the average to look very similar to your other videos. But even though they look very similar, they differ in that very key day one. At the same time, average view duration can tell us if this video was as compelling to your audience as they normally are. Typically, when we're talking about average view duration, we're talking about the specific average number of minutes watched. YouTube's been pretty upfront that this is the important watch time metric. So if my struggling video has much lower average view duration, the question is the video shorter, or were people just watching a smaller percentage of it? If the video was just shorter than normal, then you probably want to increase the length of the video back to what you typically do when you're succeeding. If the video is the same length as your other videos, then we go into the retention graph and we look for spots where people have dropped off in interest. Those can be content things, so they're a little bit harder to spot. If you notice an unusual dip in attention, try and figure out what would cause that, and then obviously avoid doing that in any future upload. Next, I'm going to look at traffic sources. Your CTR and AVD may look really similar at all levels, but in traffic sources, they might be very different. So if I normally get 50% of all my traffic from suggested, and on this video, I only got a third of my traffic from suggested, that tells me there was a problem, and it tells me that problem came when the video was in the suggested column. If we see a big difference in traffic sources, it can mean that there is a specific portion of this audience that didn't resonate with this content. Let's give an example of what that might look like. So let's say I run a pet channel and I do dog videos and cat videos. No matter what I upload, the viewers and browse love it. For some reason though, in suggested, they really like the dog videos, and I'm noticing that whenever I put cats in, my suggested viewership is much lower. These can be really hard problems to detect if we're just looking at our high-level metrics. And if we're trying to grow in one specific way or in one specific spot, this can be really useful information too. There will always be difference in how different traffic sources view your content. That's perfectly natural. For example, search tends to always have a much higher than average CTR because people were deliberately searching for a kind of content. And as long as your video wasn't straight lying about what it was, if they find it in search, it usually has a pretty high CTR. But if our struggling video looks a lot different than our average upload does, then that tells us that our audience is probably split somehow. At that point, if we're looking to have the highest audience possible, we need to find what they have the most in common and emphasize that so that we're not sacrificing one audience for the other. We don't want you splitting up your audience, and one of the best ways to detect that you're doing that is with your traffic sources, and see if that looks different than an average upload. Once you've looked at these metrics, you'll probably start to have an understanding of what happened. And then I like to go back to the view chart and see if I can't map some of these issues to specific spots in performance. Suggested views tend to be a longer tail viewership where browse tends to be your core audience who is there right as the video is uploaded on day one. And let's say that suggested CTR is a little bit weak. When I'm at the view chart, I'm going to expect a still really good day one, at least average, and then I'm going to expect it to flatline because we're not getting that long tail suggested viewership anymore. Conversely, if suggested's doing well and browse is doing low, you'll see kind of a weaker day one start, but you'll see viewership kind of just stay level. The longer tail viewership of suggested is still working, but your core audience didn't resonate in the same way. Neither of these things are things to celebrate, but understanding which one I'm dealing with is super helpful. And now that we know what's wrong, we can start to devise a solution to fix it. If it doesn't look anything at all like I'd expect, first, double check your work. Did you look at the CTR correctly? Did you look at the AVD correctly? Next, I'd go and try and find a different similar video. Maybe the video that you grabbed as a point of comparison is an outlier. If you go through all of that and you still don't have a good answer, this is when I start looking for like weird external factors. How are other similar channels doing in the space? Did they have a bad day? Have they had slumps in videos recently? Is this part of a series? These are the kinds of things that I explore if I have exhausted every other understanding I have of a video. Honestly, most of the time that you diagnose a bad video, it's going to be that the CTR was bad. If you don't find an answer there, go to your other big metric. Go to your traffic sources. See if your big metrics are weird. If you find something weird, compare it to your views, make sure it makes sense. And if all of that fails, then you can start looking for weird answers. And with that, you should be able to diagnose why a video didn't do well. And over time, as we stop making mistakes and we start doing more and more things right, growth is a natural outcome, which is basically like the whole thing that I do. Hopefully you know why your video didn't get any views. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, we have other great videos on audience development that you can watch right now. If you like this video, be sure to leave a like so that we know that you liked it and that you want to see more things like it. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for more videos on audience development every single week. See you next time.